Okay, we're going to begin to go through the assignments and the assignment submissions that occur on task stream. The task stream, as I said before, is a new field education document management system. So you're going to be using task stream for all of the students' assignments. It has been very helpful so far in helping to streamline the communication and help us with our data collection. It is difficult in the beginning to get used to, according to some of our field instructors and students. I believe that's because it's a very stepped process. If you miss a step or don't do a step, it throws the whole thing off. And so it's very, very important that anytime that you're using TaskStream, you have your guide in front of you that has step-by-step directions with pictures and your tip sheet in front of you. Excuse me. Those will take you step by step through everything. But again, if you miss one of those steps, then you're going to have difficulty. TaskStream is not something that you can just start clicking into and figuring out kind of what you think is the right way to go. You have to have that guide with you to be able to go through the specific steps in the very specific order. So consult those documents as we move forward. In addition, you have a link to a webinar that we recorded that goes through the field instructor responsibilities as it pertains to TaskStream. So please use those tools. It will outline specifically for you and detail specifically and show you actually using TaskStream how to proceed. So there's four primary tasks and assignments that we're going to go through and that are available in TaskStream for completion. Those include the learning plan and the checklist, the journals, of which there are 5, and a midterm form and a final form. Students have always done course evaluations. Those were paper-based like everything else before. The student evaluates the field instructor, the student evaluates the agency, and the student evaluates the faculty liaison. Those will automatically be deployed to the student via email, and automatically the information will be collected and stored. Okay, so let's begin talking about the learning agreement. The learning agreement is completed and entered into TaskStream in the first 2 to 3 weeks of practicum. As you can see in the slide here, there are some approximate dates for 7971 and a deadline date for 8971. For 7971, that learning plan needs to be entered into TaskStream prior to that initial meeting that is made with the faculty liaison. Students have to do a learning plan for field. This learning plan is owned by the student, but should be negotiated and discussed between you as the field instructor and the student. You know the agency well and will know additional opportunities for the student to include in the learning plan. So it's important that you guys discuss it so you can share that information and so the student can share with you what he, she, or they want to learn about working at your agency. And so it's kind of a cooperative agreement between both of you. The learning plan is used kind of as that basic as the basis for the practicum experience. And so we'll refer back to that learning plan a lot to make sure that the student is on track and to help us see that the student is meeting all of those competencies and practice behaviors that need to be reached by the end of the semester. So it helps us to see the progress that's being made towards those goals. The student, again, has to be active in the process and participatory in setting up that learning plan. The learning plan should be revisited during supervision. So on basically a weekly basis, they should be talking to you about their progress and about the things that they have fulfilled on their learning plan and the things that they still need to have experiences in. Remember that students that are in 7971 are approaching their learning plan and their practicum with a generalist perspective. So they are expected to get experience in micro, meso, and macro in all levels of the agency. So they have just a little bit of depth, but across a wide variety of agency roles and duties. So they should have some basic assessment and resources with direct clients. They should have some kind of group interventions, psychoeducational groups, or some kind of outreach group education that they're able to do. And then some macro work that can consist of participating in policy writing, board meetings, fundraising, legislative work. All of those things would qualify as the more macro work, looking at functions on an organizational level versus an individual level. And then the students in 8971 are focusing more on their PPNA or clinical track and the curriculum, that advanced curriculum on whichever track they have chosen. And so they should be getting much more depth within a smaller area within the agency, either that micro side or that macro side. So be sure that your student is adding all of those things into the learning plan. Okay, at this point, it's a good idea to consult the learning plan samples that we've provided in your packet of information. That you have completed learning plans, and so you can kind of see what I'm talking about as I'm referring to the different sections of the learning plan. In the left-hand column, you'll see some learning goals and competencies. So those are 1 through 10 that are specific CSWE learning goals and competencies that have been set up that we are expected to follow. Underneath each of those 10 specific goals, you will find bulleted points or ABCDE points in the task stream versions. And those have what we call practice behaviors. So those are the operational definition of each of those learning goals and competencies, and we're going to review those in a couple minutes in this next few slides. And so those are what we expect for the student to accomplish during practicum. Now, how the student is going to achieve accomplishing those goals are the behavioral objectives and the learning experiences that the student is adding into the learning plan. So how will the student achieve those goals within your specific agency? With using the projects, using the work with the clients, using the possible experiences and opportunities that are available to them at your agency. So those will be very specific according to your agency and what opportunities the student has available there. The evaluation piece is how your field instructor will be able to tell you have completed the goal. So, for example, if completing 10 assessments is one of the goals for the learning plan, the way that will be evaluated will be can be direct observation. It can be review of assessment documentation. It can be chart reviews. It can be through discussion and supervision. There's multiple ways that can be evaluated. So if it's a project, perhaps there's an end product that will be delivered to the field instructor. Perhaps the student will be providing a presentation that you'll be attending. Lots of different things and ways that you will be able to evaluate the student and the completion of that learning goal and objective.
Okay, let's look at the competencies a little bit. You'll notice that the competencies, for those of you that have been field instructors for us before, the competencies are all new. Our accrediting body rewrote competencies in 2015, and those are being implemented for the first time in 2018. So you'll find new foundational, new advanced clinical, new advanced integrated health, and new advanced PPNA practice behaviors. Here in the first competency, you'll see Learning Goal 1, demonstrating ethical and professional behavior. That's the competency, and then each of the bullet points underneath is what we call practice behaviors. You'll notice that these are the practice behaviors that are located on the learning plan and that are what is used for your midterm and final evaluations for the students as well. The first one here combines a couple of the different competencies that we used to have into one competency. Many of the same things are addressed, using supervision and consultation, using and finding ethical reasoning and ethical decision making, as well as using the NASW Code of Ethics. Please note also that the Code of Ethics was rewritten at the end of 2017, and so that's new versions as well. That's something that if your staff or your agency is not aware of, perhaps the students can be tasked with helping to educate you guys about that. The most changes, really all the changes, were directly related to technology that has changed. So that might be something that you want to check out and that students might be able to do in this section in their learning plan as well. Competency 2, engaging diversity and difference in practice. I'm not going to read each of these as we go through. Many of these are similar to our prior competencies. Self-awareness and self-regulation are important. Making sure that they're engaged in this process, and for sure in their first practicum they need to be looking at all of the micro, meso, and macro levels during their practicum at some point. They need to be doing some individual assessment and resources. They need to be doing some potential group work, family work, outreach groups, outreach education, and some macro work, attending legislative days, attending community-wide meetings, working on organizational policy, etc. Competency 3, foundational, is advanced human rights and social and economic justice. You'll see that environmental justice is now added into our competencies. In every area, you'll see that that is addressed as well, and so students need to be aware of that and be able to talk about how they're contributing to environmental justice. And otherwise, this one is similar to the ones that we've had before, which is applying their understanding and engaging in practices that advance social and economic and environmental justice. Competency 4 used to be Competency 6. Now it is Competency 4, which is research. You'll find more practice behaviors in this area than we used to have. Using for the foundational, using practice experience to inform scientific inquiry. And here you see the critical thinking that I was talking about that are really engaged throughout each of the learning goals. And then translating research evidence to inform and improve practice. And so that is the foundational level, and though it's divided into 3 here, is pretty similar to what we used to have as foundational for research. Here we have Competency 5, engaging in policy practice. Looking at foundational, really having the student going beyond looking at policy within the agency, but looking community-wide, statewide, federal, and they have lots of access to things that they can do just sitting in the office. But they can also go, we really encourage them to write into their learning plan some advocacy days, going to some rallies. There's certainly lots of information in state and federal government coming out right now that's important for them to keep track of. Also, the legislation that's in the state government, and becoming active in that. They can also live stream sessions that are occurring in the legislation so that they can track different bills that are important to their clients that they're serving at your agency. So it's really important that they attend to this. Sometimes policy is sort of waits to the end, but it's something that they need to get on their radar early, because they keep pushing it off, and then they realize they only have a couple of weeks left of practicum and they haven't addressed these policy issues. There are lots of opportunities for them to go to different advocacy days, and we can certainly hook you up with some of those. Representative Martha Stevens has agreed to provide some assistance to us with that as well, and can help us to locate some different advocacy days and some different opportunities to shadow in the state capitol. So if you have any needs in that area, you can again just let us know. And you'll see that we see critical thinking again here in the policy practice. Competency 6. So you'll notice that this is very different starting at Competency 6. In our previous competencies, you had Competency 10 that was divided into 4 sections: engage, assess, intervene, and evaluate. Now those are separated into 4 different competencies. So these are competencies 6 through 9. They look a lot alike, just changing that engage, assess, intervene, and evaluate component. You'll also notice that there used to be a competency about human behavior in the social environment. It was competency 7. And now that is, just like critical thinking, is infused throughout all of them. So you'll see the first practice behavior, and all of these has to do with human behavior in the social environment, or what you'll hear me call HBSE, HBSE. So you'll see here that engaging is providing that kind of basic theoretical knowledge, person and environment, ecological theory, developmental theories, those basic human behaviors to engage with clients and constituencies. And then, of course, we have our empathy and reflection and all of those interpersonal skills that students learn in their foundational year. Now we move to Competency 7, which you'll see is very similar. You'll just see that different word of assessment in front of there. Students that are in their first practicum should definitely be able to do some kind of assessment by the time they leave practicum. They should have done some assessments independently. That can be with you in the room or with you out of the room, but they need to be able to conduct an assessment. They need to leave practicum 1 having some experience in conducting that. They practice doing that in class and have done that in their foundational year. And so now is the time for them to try to apply that skill. And assessment is a very generalist skill, right? We all need to have that skill. And so that's something that we like to see them leaving with. They need to be able to collect and organize that data. Here you see that critical thinking again, you see that HBSE again, and then being able to set up some kind of plan for what they want to do with that group, those constituencies, or those clients. And deciding what interventions are the best. Those interventions could be just resource acquisition, since this is a foundational generalist practicum, but they need to be able to take what they've learned about the client and be able to apply that to a strategy or however they want to move forward with that client or those groups. Okay, Competency 8. So now we get to intervene. Again, looking at critically choosing the correct intervention strategies so that you can achieve those client goals, looking at HBSE again, using that collaboration, being able to work with different agencies and different professions in helping the clients to achieve their outcomes. advocating on behalf of diverse clients, and always looking at those terminations. Typically, when I come for midterms, I like to see that all sections of the midterm evaluation are completed and that there's no non-applicable areas. We want every students to have experiences in everything. The one exception that I do typically see, which is acceptable, is that I sometimes see that this one, effective transitions and endings, tend to be delayed until the final evaluation, because I look at competencies 6 through 9 here, and I see that competency 6 and 7 are pretty well adjusted to and mastered by around midterm, maybe a tiny bit after midterm. But then the intervention and the evaluation piece and that termination piece typically tend to wait until towards the end of the semester. But it's still important that students are letting their clients know and their groups know that they are time limited and that they are ending at a certain time, so that everyone's prepared for that when it does occur. But sometimes I do see that transitions and terminations tend to wait more towards the end of the semester, which is fine. And finally, competency 9. It's looking at the evaluating your practice. And again, we talked about this a little bit before, but being able to improve, find out if your practice is effective, and then being able to improve practice effectiveness at all levels, at the program level, at the organizational level, and at that micro level. So looking at all of those different levels, looking at how your human behavior and the social environment information is used in your evaluation process.
Okay, the learning plan and the checklist and test stream. When you are completing the learning plan and looking over the learning plan, you always are going to be under the reviewer tab. It's important to look at those different tabs that you have access to. On the very first login page, you will see a reviewer tab and an evaluator tab. For all the learning plan and all of the 5 journals, you will always be in the reviewer tab. It's only later assignments that you will be in the evaluator tab, and we will talk about that. It's, again, very important to know those tabs and to be in the right one. It's also important that you have your tip sheet out, that you have your guide out. There's a sample learning plans that you can look at, and there's a webinar link that we've provided for you. When you click on that link, it's going to ask you some different questions, your name and the school you're associated with, etc. And if you just fill those out and click on it, it will open straight up into the webinar for you. And that webinar will show you actual time in TaskStream and what it actually looks like. And the guide also has pictures that correspond with that. And so please use those resources as it's not something that you can just click through. It's something that you need to mindfully move step by step as the instructions say. So reference those resources throughout the time. So you're going to be again on that reviewer tab. The student is going to go into first and complete that learning plan. It's going to take multiple sittings for the student to do that. So the student's able to save and put it aside for a little while, etc. So the student can do that in different parts. Once the student has a sort of final product, the student can click request comments, and the student will identify you as the person that they're requesting comments from. And it will automatically then alert you via email that you have pending requests for comments. So you'll go in and you'll make some comments. There's a section for you to do that. And make sure that you're looking over that learning plan, because again, this is what we use as the base for the rest of the practicum. It's sort of like an agreed upon contract. And so make sure that these things are appropriate for the level of the student, and that these are realistic things that the student can do. The student will then look at once you submit those comments, the student will get an email, and the student will look at those comments and make the necessary changes. Then once the student has made those changes, the student will request comments from the faculty liaison. The faculty liaison will then likely give a lot of feedback and ask for some changes. The student will then make those changes, and then now that learning plan will just stay like that. The student will not submit that learning plan. It will just stay open and can go back and forth between you and the student as much as you would like until after midterm, when the faculty liaison finally instructs the student to submit for grading. The reason that we do this is we want this document to be able to stay open and be a fluid document and be able to have multiple changes on it throughout the semester if any circumstances change or the student identifies new areas of interest. And so once we pass midterm, the faculty liaison will talk through and let the student know to go ahead and submit that for grading, and then we'll provide that grade. For the checklist, you're not going to have to do anything for that. The student will sit at a computer with the student sign-on and go through that checklist and check off every item. You will have to be present for some of that because the student will need to consult you for the information or consult you for where the student can find the designated policies that the student is expected to collect. But you, again, won't have to do anything with that. Once the checklist is finished, the student will click submit, and that will go straight to the liaison, skipping you, because you've already gone through it with the student and provided that orientation. And again, that's just to provide you with a little bit of framework. You're free at your agency to do any of these more in depth, to provide any more orientation that you see fit as an agency that is necessary for the student, whether that's more HIPAA training, whether that's more safety training, whatever is necessary within your institution. But these are just the bare minimum guidelines for orientation.